So, Apoorva, where did you go to college?
Arun, you know me for so many years. I thought you would know that by now.
I'm asking for a reason.
I went to Lady Shri Ram College in New Delhi.
Ever had any reason to be called to the principal's office?
I know what you're doing, okay? I'm not going to admit that. My moments of fun on camera. But of course, you know what I remember of it is the principal, okay? I do believe that LSR has been an instrumental part of who I've become in my journey here. And I remember we used to fondly call her MG, who's our guest today, Dr. Meenakshi Gopinath, walking the corridors with a peaceful, calm smile and yet a determination of a warrior and grace as a dancer. Dr. Meenakshi Gopinath, our guest for today, she's a trailblazer, I would say, in many ways. Of course, the ex-principal of LSR. She's also been an author, a Padma Shri awardee, and also the first woman appointed to the Indian National Security Advisory Board. So let me welcome Dr. Gopinath. Thank you so much for doing this with us.
Thank you, Purva. It's a very, very special honor for me and a privilege to be in the midst of two stalwarts who are actually blazing a new trail, and to your golden hour as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I personally wanted to meet you for long since I've passed out of LSR, so this is a great moment for me. But I'd love to ask you, from being a student of LSR yourself to being the principal, what do you recall in that journey as the most momentous in your life?
Well, from being the student to the teacher and then to the principal, that's a long span. I came into LSR at the age of 16 as a student. I stayed on to be a teacher. I had other options. I was briefly at the Jawaharlal Nehru University. But then I came back to LSR, much to the chagrin of many of the professors and deans there, who told me, "You're like a frog in a well, you're leaving a university to go back to a college." But I think it was something that my heart told me to do. The journey itself has been magical. Every single day was a new day. Every single encounter, almost every single encounter, opened up doors of perception that I hadn't imagined would happen in a college, a small college. In those days, it was an elite college, and you were part of
It
that.
continues to be, I would say that.
But yes, so I would say it was a magical space to work. It was a space where women found voice, and it was fascinating to watch young women acquire wings and take flight.
So, when you think about the journey that you've had, were you thinking about being purposeful in taking those steps along the way, or is it now when you think back and you look at your career, you say, well, there were a lot of momentous opportunities along the way, and I made this decision here and this one here, and how do you think about it?
Arun, I've always believed in the 3 S's in my life. One is serendipity, one is synergy, and the other is synchronicity. When these things somehow come together as a confluence, those choices become choiceless. So there's a point where the mind informs the heart, and then the heart informs the mind. So we all think we are actually volitionally making every single decision in our life. But you know that it's usually the plan B that plays itself out, and seldom the plan A. And I think in your corporate structure, you tell every young person that be prepared with a plan B. But the plan B is a part of the universe's method to inform you that there are other larger forces at work which you may not see immediately, which you may not dip into immediately, but it will unfold as a pattern of your life. So that's how I would.
When we are going through the grind, as I would say, there are curveballs that come our way. Right now, you can look back and say, it was meant to be and it led to my path. But how do you prepare yourself, when the curveball is not going as per the direction that you thought about it?
I think you have to be constantly engaging with two ideas. I mean, at least for me. One is the idea of cultivating abundance. So, it's like not counting how many seeds there are in an apple, which is easy to do, but to imagine how many apples there could be in a seed. So, that is that continuous cultivation of a spirit of abundance and moving away from a spirit of scarcity, being decolonized in a sense, no? Not limits, but possible, engaging in that. The other thing I think is for all of us, I mean, it helped me. We are surrounded by so many people who put on masks. We ourselves put on masks. We go in and out of identities. I was reminded very often people would say, and in the corporate sector, you put a great stress on communication. How do you communicate? What do you communicate? How do you advocate? What do you say? And the one thing I think, which is perhaps the most abiding lesson I learned, was you communicate if you're authentic. There are moments when we find we are being inauthentic, like very often happens, and we then put on this mask of great conviviality. And the other person always, always will recognize mendacity. We think we've made the impact. But there is something beyond the spoken word that communicates this. So I would say abundance, spirit of abundance, a spirit of striving for authenticity.
So these concepts, amazing concepts, three S's, developing the adequate thirst. How did you bring that to life in the college?
Oh my goodness.
As a principal,
Big challenge. Yeah. I think basically to engage with young minds, to stretch beyond prescribed curricula, not just accept received curricula, but to push the boundaries. Your founder, Prabhakant Sinha, he would often say, look at a problem till it cracks. And then the problem speaks to you in ways in which you didn't quite figure out or understand. So first of all, it's very, very important to be in charge of what it is that you're setting out to do, recognizing that it may not always follow the same principle. So to be in that state of abundance is to always be able to think laterally, as you would say, a plan B, and to know that you have to bloom wherever you're planted. Bloom where you're planted. Whichever are your circumstances, try to change them. I think LSR women impact their workplaces in many ways. I've heard that from lots of people who recruit. That when they come into the workplace, there's something they do which is different.
I can attest that that's absolutely the case with Apoorva, for sure.
Yeah.
And, mentors, allies, the role of mentors, allies. I mean, as you look back, are there things that particularly stand out to you as, I needed a helping hand and somehow I got that? Could be serendipity? Or someone else had to synchronize with me in some meaningful way and that propelled me, etc. I mean, can you speak to that about the role of allies?
I think that every individual is a universe. She or he brings a universe to you, a universe of successes, a universe of failures, a universe of aspirations, universe of expectations. How do you begin to recognize that every individual that enters your life in a particular way carries with her or him a message for you? So you just have to fine tune your sensibilities to. So if you're talking about mentors, of course, all of us have mentors as children, as professionals. So if I were to go back to some of the ideas that I try to work on, not always successfully, I think of my father, for example, my grandfather, my grandmother, my father, because one of the first things he taught me was to recognize the responsibility of privilege. He would always tell me that, look, you've had the opportunity to study in a good school, and what do you think you're going to do for those who could not? And I was too young and I thought he was giving me lectures, but I always remember he would hold my hand and walk me through those promenades, and he would always stop at a place where there was a shoe shine boy, or young street children who were trying to sell you those second-hand many, many books that were always laid out. And he would say, have you asked him his name? And I'd say, no, why should I? He said, you know, because he's a person and he's your age. Why don't you ask him his name? And so, in a sense, that whole notion that every individual counts, every individual's dignity is as important to you as your own. So that initially taught me the importance of recognizing that those who are invisible are not necessarily unproductive.
It's interesting how, you mentioned Prabha, one of our founders. He always talking about paying it forward, right? Which is this element, and you've learned it from somebody. I had
Another thing from
Yeah.
Prabha, but you always knew here was an individual who stood out in the crowd and he didn't carry it very heavily on his shoulders because he always was looking for the larger picture.
I know you had a bunch of questions on advice and aspirations, but I have one follow up to this, which is you look back and you see Padma Shri, 2007, I believe. Do you look back at the accolades? Do you look back at the opening of this institute? You look back to one individual person who you somehow meaningfully changed in some way, and you felt that sense of like accomplishment on the moment. Like how do you look back, and do you look for these accolades, and that's how it defines you? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I feel very humbled by these accolades, but it also places an enormous responsibility. Um, and I normally don't refer to them because the journey is a work in progress. As I think Pericles said, uh, what you leave behind is not what is written in monuments of stone, but what you weave into the lives of others. So others have woven much into my life's tapestry. I hope I'm able to weave something into other people's lives. And that is an ongoing journey that continues, that is aspirational. And one thing I do want to say, increasingly, I believe that this is the century of women, and that women will redefine notions of progress, notions of security, notions of the sustainable development goals as they've already done. So I always believe that in the Tao of leadership, which is that soft is strong. Um, water can soften the rock in ways in which a sledgehammer cannot. So, how do we look for that conceptual vocabulary? How do we make it a part of our lives? How do we arrive at a certain balance, which is both spiritually enriching? I don't mean religiously, spiritually enriching, rewarding. And yes, I do believe many people fashion my lives. My peers who always held up the mirror to me and said, look, I don't think this is the right thing to do. It takes a while to be able to accept peer feedback. But that is the crucial
It's a great
aspect.
source of strength. It
Yes.
can set you in the right.
No, I was just, it's like having courageous conversations as well, right? Something that we encourage a lot within CS. But, I want to go back to that discussion that you were talking about, which is, being a woman and you're bringing the dialogue, insecurity and peace, from a very different lens. And sometimes we believe that even in the corporate sector and organization that we work with, as you go up, the percentage of women in leadership and the voice is fewer, right? So any advice for women who are in this journey of trailblazing or, feeling like, oh, it's not been done before?
Solidarity, solidarity, solidarity. There's a way in which you can collaboratively succeed. But for that, you have to set up some predispositions where you see in every individual's success a part of you manifested. Connectivity doesn't give you connection. So, how does one constantly work towards building the sense that we are all interconnected in some way? and that I owe you a debt of gratitude. You owe Arun, Arun may owe me, and so on and so forth. And especially for young women in the corporate sector, I would say never fall for fashion. Always be in style. Because fashion fades and style endures.
MG, you talked about this being the century for women, okay? And you also talked about some advice for women in terms of agency and voice. What would be your advice to the men and the allies around?
Apoorva, I would like to ask you. You work in a space that where a lot of men call the shots as well, but you have changed that vocabulary, and it'll be interesting to see how you do it because a lot of women of your age and at this as a mid-career senior professional redefine the norms of the workplace. So I would be very curious to know what you have done here and what your experience has been.
I think a couple of things that has enabled me, empowered me. I think the first is the self, which is I really want to do this. This is a passion for me. I believe that, working and continuing to add value to my own life and people around me, I think has kept me driven. I think at ZS, and I would say that a couple of things that really, which I can say. One, I find this like a white canvas. Every time I think I've, risen my head and said I want to do this, I've got amazing opportunities as well as belief that you can. So this, I didn't have to put myself in a box and be authentic of who I am, irrespective of the gender. I think played a big part of my role. The second one would be a few mentors, allies, champions, coaches that I've had. Arun right here being one as well. And then I think having a very supportive ecosystem at home to have been created. I have a daughter who's now 15-year-old, and hence being able to manage that with work, to be able to rely on friends, families when you're traveling. I think just reaching out to say, people, I need help. It's it is okay to ask for help. I think it's gone a long way in my journey.
This concept of solidarity, do you that Dr. Gopinath talked about, do you think that we can see that here, or do you think we can find a way to grow it in abundance here?
I think we see it here for sure. There is a lot of that's happening, and but there's always scope to improve. I would say that, right? But I think there are examples where I can say that somebody's stood next to me, and we've together taken something ahead rather than the whole concept of collaboration. I think is big. It's yes. And it's not about it's. We definitely have a healthy paranoia in a competition. Like I wanted to win from Arun with my answers, but otherwise, I think I know that we are standing together. Together is better, and we grow together. I think it goes a long way in the way that we think.
What would we do without our men? We love them dearly, and I think it's a great opportunity to be able to work together and also bring our perspectives on a particular issue, which may be different because it brings a different skill set. Empathy is one of them, inclusion is another. You think differently. Women speak in a different voice, but I'm not here to reductivize the role of women or be that kind of feminazi. But I would really love to hear from Arun. Like, you mentor so many people. Is the mentoring of women for you different in terms of the quality of their priorities and questions? From that, it would be of a comparably placed professional man.
Yes. Firstly, I think Vinita Bali, who I know you know really well, she talked about this concept of Renaissance men. If you look at senior positions, it's largely men dominated. And so you need some Renaissance men to be able to step aside and say, this is important, let's do it. So first, you got to step up and you got to have the belief. The second is, I always thought, that empathy was more about putting myself in somebody else's shoes. And the more I think about it, the more I realize in matters like this, it's not about putting myself in somebody else's shoes, but to live in somebody else's shoes for a day. And if you just, that small pivot just opens your eyes in a big way. And I think, is it different? Yeah, I think it's different. I mean, you got the pressures. I mean, I have a working wife who's a surgeon, and I know what she does, and she works 2 jobs before she leaves to work the job at the hospital. So it's you got to understand what they go through, and you got to work with them. And so I do think it's different, and you have to think differently as well.
That's great, Arun, because one thing women should not fall for or be entrapped by is this idea that is perpetuated that women can multitask. So you continue to multitask, kill yourself in the process because you have to prove that women can multitask. No way. You do whatever you can in the space and the time you have, and let's share the load. And I know that your company is invested greatly in mitigation, adaptation, and I would love to hear the experiences during COVID as to how you walked that extra mile to provide through AI and other things.
Yeah, it's
for
not just
these
through AI. I think, Apoorva, I remember you did a lot of work in trying to figure out, where are you going to get oxygen cylinders, and then communicate to the rest of the organization that this is where we have secured a few, if someone in your family needs it too. Because suddenly work takes a secondary motion,
yeah.
and in life, right? I think.
And I think it also really reduced barriers in terms of when we're working with clients across geographies, right? Because nobody's walking the corridor and nobody's miles, continents away. We are all in Zoom and video calls, and we could see our clients' cats cutting across the laptop and somebody's children, in the background. And I think it just normalized all of us as humans first, and not only a professional coming into work. And I think that really, helped us to, get to know and build some of those connections deeper during this time.
I remember a very interesting story of a friend of mine who was, of course, working online, and his grandmother would invariably come and offer him food and nourishment and so on and so forth. So apparently his boss called him and said, "What is this? You're getting distracted by all of this stuff. I think you should be professional." So he told his grandmother that, "Look, please don't enter the screen or don't be anywhere in my room when I'm having this, because it's a professional discussion." So she said, "Okay, do you mind if I speak to your CEO just for 5 minutes?" So when he came online, she said to him that, "Listen, you are entering my house and you want me to disappear? How can I do that?" So for the first time, you humanize the workspace. And then the other thing you did also, inadvertently, was that the necessity for people who were working from home to put up a show. In other words, they would put a painting behind their room. They would make sure that it all looked very sanitized and well, and so on and so forth. But so there was that pressure as well. And we found it a lot in the education space.
So the humanization works both ways: work to home, but also home to work.
It's also something that I talk to and tell a lot of people I work with, and especially women. If you're looking at a career of about 60 years, then make bigger milestones and, keep it for that, so that you're, one, not burnt out. Second, you're not on a milestone of a year or two and feel like this is critical, and continue to be in it like
Larger picture.
Larger picture, absolutely. So yeah, I think it goes a long way.
Well, Dr. Gopinath, it has been a pleasure to chat with you. I think I learned a lot, and it was very, very nice for me to hear your stories about cultivation of the authenticity. I loved your 3 S's, and maybe I'll just end with a Maya Angelou quote, which is one of my favorite ones, which is that people don't quite remember what you said, people don't remember what you did, but they often remember how you made them feel. And I think there were several times in this conversation when I for sure had goosebumps. And so you did make a mark on me for that. And so for that, thank you very
So
much.
since you mentioned Maya Angelou, can I sort of add one more line from her, which is for all women, that my mission in life is not to survive, but to thrive, and to do so with some passion, some compassion, some humor, and some style.
Yeah, what a great way to
What a great way to end. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's
Such
been
a
such a
pleasure.
privilege
Absolutely.
for me to be here in this beautiful office with this fantastic crew of people. And I can see the synergy here as well, which you bring. So thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.